Today I'd like to talk about self-care, and maybe we might explore what actually that means. When a friend says to us, look after yourself, take care of yourself, mind yourself, those words, often we don't really know what that means. So hopefully you'll get a sense of a little bit more of an understanding as to what self-care truly is, because it's a lot more complicated than you might think. Self-care, because we're human, we are comprised of the physical body, the emotional body, and the spiritual body. So that's our mind, body, and spirit, all three aspects. And all three aspects go a long way towards our health and well-being, helping us, I suppose, to feel well, feel at peace, feel in a good place, and feel healthy. And our mental health is very much based around our emotional health, what we do with our emotions. So let's just start with our physical health. Our physical health, if we take it at a very foundation level, at the very basics, that would involve diet, exercise, sleep, perhaps including also what is our work-life balance like. But really looking at those different aspects, and when we look at diet and we look at our relationship with our food, there's always an emotional component in how we are with food, whether we overeat or whether we undereat. Very often there can be an emotional component found to it because there's comfort, there's a familiarity, it's what we have always done. The relationship we've learned with food from maybe a very young age, or maybe one that we developed maybe at a time when we were struggling and it helped us, whether that was overeating or, again, as I say, undereating. So really looking at that and seeing, is there room for improvement there? Is it cause for a difficulty there in my health and well-being? Because, the body can only I suppose, respond to what we give it or don't give it if we're starving our bodies. That's diet. Exercise is another fundamental need that the human body needs. And again, looking at our relationship again with exercise. Do we over-exercise or do we under-exercise? Again, having a look at that. Is it balanced? Is it within balance? What do we do with it? And again, sleep. We don't tend to do so well when we don't get enough sleep. And every human being will be different, but an average would be 7 to 8 hours sleep that most of us will need to, I guess, to feel well, to get up the next day ready for whatever the day brings us. And so if we're not getting enough sleep, it's almost like the mobile phones that we have, and we plug them in every night and we recharge them. We wouldn't dream of not charging them up. Well, if we're not getting enough sleep, and we're far more important, I believe, than a mobile phone. It's the same thing. We can't expect to get so much out of ourselves. So having a look at those, just a broad view, to have an idea to see where we are with those, and including our work-life balance. What is that like? Do we find that we give too much of ourselves to work and there's very little left for me time or from my relationships, my friends? So again, looking at that piece. But I guess in order to do this, we've got to be open to really open and looking to see maybe is there another way of doing things. And I always believe that that's a useful exercise for us when we're talking about our self-care. Are we open to change? Are we open to doing things in maybe a healthier way, in a better way that we might actually feel better? That's our physical health. Then we move on to our emotional health or our mental health, either or. Mental health is, I believe, fundamentally what we do with our emotions is a large part of attributing whether our mental health how we are, whether we struggle with it or not. And let's be honest, as human beings, we will all struggle with our mental health. It's what we do with it that matters. So, as I've said before, do we find ourselves minimizing, justifying, or denying? Trying to push it under the carpet when we know we're struggling with depression, with anxiety, with relationships, staying in situations, staying in workplaces that we know are not good for us. And really, this requires us to have a close look and be honest and be open to change. Maybe to be open to looking for some professional help if that's required. But when we look at our mental health, I believe we ignore it at our peril. It's one of those things that can literally, drive us crazy, where we feel our minds are constantly going, we're going round and round, ruminating around things that are not working for us so well. And we've all known those experiences. Maybe we're going through a crisis, maybe we're going through a trauma, maybe there's grief, loss, all of those normal human things that happen in our lives. We are not going to be happy all of the time. That's unrealistic. But if we feel that our depression, our anxiety, our low mood, our low energy is emotionally based, then I believe it's well worth having a look at. Having an awareness around even that sense of what I do with my emotions. What do I do when I'm in a bad place? Do I put on a face and do I go out there and tell nobody? Do I suppress those feelings? Those hard feelings like anger, shame, guilt. Those heavy feelings that really weigh us down and hold us back from living. So what I call, do I bottle my feelings? So I push them down. And quite the opposite to what, if you can imagine a Coke bottle, and our emotions are in the Coke bottle, and we shake up the Coke bottle and it comes under pressure. And we know that what wants to happen is that the lid on the Coke bottle wants to just open and emotions go everywhere. That's the gas in the Coke bottle. That's what our emotions are like. What I'm advocating is that we can learn a way to open and close the Coke bottle slowly, piece by piece, so that it doesn't go everywhere. That's our fear sometimes. Well, if I dip into these emotions, they may go everywhere. What will happen? I may start crying. I may not stop. All our fears. And yet every emotion has a start, a middle, and an end. If we can only trust the process, if we can dare to explore, to have a look. So that's what I believe works best for us with our mental health, is knowing the importance and the relevance of expressing our emotions. So again, as I say, having an awareness around that aspect. So we've got physical health, we've got mental health, and we've also got spiritual health. That's one that we're often kind of reluctant to look at, or it's not quite so obvious. And I believe that we are spiritual by virtue of the fact that we're humans. It is, I believe, by virtue of the fact that we know we will die someday, that can cause us spiritual angst or difficulties. So from the moment we're born, we know that we will die someday. So in many ways, we can go into survival mode. The difficulty is if we remain in survival mode. And of course, we know as life goes on, we are touched by loss, by grief, by death of others. Serious illnesses can cause us to have a very close look at our spirituality, our mortality. So, and tied into our spiritual health is very much the really key question of what is the meaning and the purpose of my life? What am I doing here? What is it all about? I believe when we look after the mind, the body, and the spirit, it's a bit like the scales. So we've got 3 scales, and each one is as important as the other, because our physical health impacts on our emotional health, impacts on our spiritual health. And sometimes we may have a physical illness, and so that brings the scales way off, and then it brings our emotional and our spiritual scales way off as well. So we're a little bit disconnected, or maybe a lot disconnected from ourselves. We work best when we attend to all 3. And we generally are in a good place when we've got some balance between all 3. So that's what I'm talking about. Perhaps you're aware today, actually, my relationships are not so good. My relationship with myself is not so good. My relationship with others are not so good. My work situation is not so good. I hate my work, and it's really, really difficult to get there. And that's going on for a long, long time. Perhaps today might be an opportunity to stop and look and check and see where there may be room for improvement for you today. Because after all, I believe that's what it is to be human. We will struggle at times. It is what we do with it that matters. So hopefully there's some food for thought there today, and that you've taken something from our discussion on self-care. And if you like what you heard, check into waterfordcounselling.com. Thank you.